All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the Real Perspectives podcast. My name is Vladimir Bosanac. I'm the co-founder and publisher of the registry and your host here today. I'm joined by my co-host, Rob Zirkle. Rob.
Vlad, how you doing, buddy? Great to see you.
I'm doing great.
For the listeners out there, I work for Prince Street Partners. I lead development. We have a focus in the Peninsula, Menlo Park, Palo Alto, Sunnyvale, Redwood City, commercial office, mixed use housing and residential projects. And I'm an architect by trade, and also was the beneficiary of being interviewed by Vlad, one of his first guests on his podcast back in 2020. So
that's
glad
right.
to be back here as a co-host.
Right. Yeah, no, this is a lot of fun, and one of the reasons that we wanted to bring in some folks is to kind of mix it up a little bit. And Rob, certainly you and your colleagues who are helping me co-host the podcast now are truly folks that are doing stuff or are in the industry, and I felt that being able to I'm some cadence to what I'm talking about, it would behoove me to have somebody that knows what he or she's saying. And so I'm very happy to have, folks like you join me here and kind of give us a sense of, really what's happening throughout the industry. So
yeah, just a fun group of people too, and just a good mix of perspectives too. So it should be a good little run for everybody. I look forward to it.
Yeah, 100%. Rob, by the way, where do we find you? Where are you?
I am sitting in my office in Menlo Park at a site of a development that we are going to renovate and move out and move on with a great project here at 800 Oak Grove.
Wonderful. And I'm in San Jose, so just down the street a little bit, so to say.
Where the sun shines. I like it.
That's right. So today we're gonna kind of tackle some AI conversations. I know it's kind of a hot topic, around many other industries and its impact, not just on this industry, but on every other. But Rob and I were kind of chatting a little bit about some of the things that we could bring up, and some good ideas came to us in terms of what is happening. On the commercial real estate side, I mean, certainly here in the Bay Area where both of us are based, we're starting to see a number of companies take lots of space. It's driving other parts of the industry. It's driving housing, it's driving industrial, it's driving traffic, right? And so I think one of the interesting things that I think nobody knows yet, but we're beginning to see a little bit, is how much space is AI and firms in AI going to be taking. Rob, what are you seeing now that you're kind of on the development side and the landlord side, right?
Yeah, it's cool. I think that's true. There's a lot of big footprint users in the market. I think you just published in the registry recently the tenants in the market list. I think there's 29 firms with more than 100,000 foot requirements out in the market.
That's
looking
right,
actively,
and that's just in Silicon Valley, right? That does not include the city of San Francisco. Yeah, but that's
phenomenal.
That's a big number,
so that's evidence right there. I'd say anecdotally, the other evidence is that I live in Oakland and I work in Menlo Park, and I can tell you that traffic is back. I'd say not 2019 levels, but it means that people are showing up, right? And people are coming back. And I think one of the kind of interesting outcroppings of AI culture is togetherness is actually pretty important. I think that the work that they're doing is they have just a cultural desire to be together to do the work, and
Right.
and that's showing up in occupancy. It's showing up in RTO. It's showing up on my drive down the 880 every day. I can tell you that is true. So yeah, no, I'm definitely seeing and feeling that as well.
Is that also tied to the computing power? Meaning in the office you're going to have faster internet than maybe Comcast or Sonic Fiber or whatever you have at home. I imagine that's part of it too, right?
It might be some of that, but I really honestly do think it's there's a collegiality in the spaces that I've walked, right? And maybe some buildings we're looking to buy that have AI companies inside. Just that feeling of the boiler room, of when you're kind of starting out, you're starting something. I think that they're in that phase as an industry where all hands on deck being mostly together in the same space has a lot of value because they're charting into the unknown and trying to figure things out as they go. And I think there's a real primacy on being together. So I think that's driving the footprint piece of the equation. I think it's driving the
Yeah.
traffic that I was mentioning before. So I think it's somewhat cultural, but I'm sure there's other things that are at the backbone of it too. But I think it's mostly just, it's when you're trying to invent and create, it's good to be around other people who are trying to invent and create. And I think that they're in that mode right now in the boiler room.
Yeah, and the other thing that we're seeing at least, and this is somewhat anecdotal, but somewhat real too, is amenities tend to be super important for this cohort. Not just because I don't know they're into specialty waters or whatever, but I think like you said, there is that culture, and maybe our audience has heard this, 996, which is kind of you're working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. I think it's a culture that originated, if I'm not mistaken, in China, in some of the tech shops there. But it seems to be basically like the new way of how companies think about work today. Have you seen that as well?
I have, yeah, for sure. I mean, both in my design practice before I joined Prince Street in a development role. That's certainly true. It's interesting too. There was, pre-COVID, there was a real primacy on the footprint per person, right? And so you would be in that range between like, let's say 135 feet in sort of a standard issue, call it a tech farm, type of use to
Yeah,
something maybe a little more in the 175 if it was a little more like a professional services firm or law firm might be a little bit more um which meant there were no amenities at the bottom end of that spectrum, right? Because it was all
right.
about like just packing in as much as
Maximizing whatever
possible.
space you got, right?
For sure. That's changed a little bit because that's just a hard culture to work in. It's like, you got to give people a reason to get in their cars and drive on the 880 to work every day or whatever. And so, having a reason for them to be there to kind of take the edge off what it's like to be sort of packed in, changes the dynamics at work too, the feeling at work. And yeah, for sure. In my design practice, that evolved over the 10 years that we were in that last upcycle, from packing as many people in to now thinking a lot more holistically about what the experience is like. And as it relates to, being on the landlord side, it's one of the things that we have our eye on too about, some of the built-in, potential in a building that may just not be fully realized yet, and how we can kind of bring that out and make it something that's attractive for somebody to want to put their company in there. And it's a little bit of an arms race, to be honest, in this respect, because landlords want to make sure that in a competitive set of buildings that we're all, playing the same game, and
Yeah,
the differences between those who get leases and don't get leases might be down to some of those details. So we don't want to leave those change. I think generally speaking, my 30-year view of, having been in the design and construction side of things for a long time now, is that it's a good thing that people have a concern for this and look at it as maybe a business model, but it delivers some real value to the people who are showing up every day. So I think holistically looking at it that way feels pretty good. Honestly, long time coming, frankly.
if you could rank order, the things that matter the most, and I don't know if this is something that even exists, but I'm I'm curious. Is location number one, or is amenities number one, or is type of space, whether it's class A or class A plus. Um, have you seen some trends evolve over the last few years in terms of like what's going to bring folks into a building?
Yeah. I think we've seen for sure, flight to quality is in full effect. The buildings that have done well are like the A's and A pluses in A and A plus locations. Those are winning at massive levels. Um, and so I think that the quality of the bones of the building obviously matter a ton. It's gotta it's got to have the right sort of sense for a company, but it's also, I mean, I think when you think about amenities, the number one amenity that you could provide to anybody is being in a great part of cities, right? Because if you're in a city, the ecosystem of cities work great when people are out on the street and they're eating, drinking, walking, moving, not just, in a cubicle somewhere. And so like the best amenity you have is being in the best neighborhood that you can be in with, the best F&B opportunities and the best nightlife, so that your day at work isn't so polarized between what you're doing at your desk and where you're at. So like if you can do that, you're doing your best thing. And if you're sort of tertiary to that, then maybe you ramp up the amenity offerings a little bit more. And I think you're seeing that up and down the chain. All of us have office buildings now with like, great gyms and,
Right.
some of us have gone as far as having cold plunges and saunas and all that kind of stuff, market ready. And, that's part of the recipe for getting through this down cycle. But I think it's also, again, I mean, I think it's given something to employees that is really helpful. And I think people who run the companies, care about that too. And, so we got the chance as landlords to create those environments. And I think at the end of the day, you focus on a quality building and a quality location, maybe quality of location first, because you can always turn a B into an A if it's in the right part of town, right? And so,
Right. Right. And
those are great.
yeah, and is that right part of town? Is it? I imagine it is amenity focused or amenity based, but also proximity to I don't know, public transportation. I mean, does that matter, or is it parking? Um, do any of those matter anymore?
I mean, they all have their place, right? Um, as traffic picks up, we're seeing increased ridership on BART and Caltrain, right? Thankfully, right? Because those systems are still feeling the shock of like instant drops in ridership. And so, as things start to begin to find their footing in the leasing market and people are generally moving back to the office, now the transit piece is going to, before COVID, man, like that was the playbook, Vlad, like developers that I was working with at the time was in my architecture practice. I mean, that was the thing, get as close to Caltrain as possible. That was the differentiator because of all of the reasons why it just is hard to get to work, sitting in a car, fighting traffic, the stress of that. Even sitting on the employee buses has its drawbacks too, the expectation of what you're going to be doing while you're on the bus and so forth. Just your
Right.
brain doesn't have any downtime, right? And so, Caltrain was the thing, and I'm glad to see that is mattering. Again, we still are looking at sites that are convenient to transit. The downside about parking is that more people also got used to driving in this last 5 years
Right.
too. So like, there's a little bit of a return to a conversation about how much on-site parking that we were a little farther past, I think, before the pandemic. So all of those matter, but at the end of the day, like the cities anywhere work best when people have like access to easy mobility that isn't usually a
100%.
single
Oh,
occupancy vehicle.
100%.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And so
Yeah.
when those transit systems work, those sites that are, I still am in the long view of the Bay Area, I still think it's a good bet to rally
Yeah.
around development and own buildings around transit opportunities for sure.
Yeah. One question that kind of keeps popping up is, and I think people wonder is, okay, so these AI companies are, leasing up a lot of space. Now we're still dealing with about, I don't know, 30 plus or around 30% vacancy in most of the major markets in, around the Bay Area. Some cities are a little bit different only because, they just don't have as much space, right? Office space available. But I am curious, and maybe maybe we don't have the answer to this, but the space that are taking, are they taking away space from other companies because they'll also be taking their business and and what they do? So will we have kind of a net even or I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
It's yeah, it's a fascinating time, both being on the developer side of the equation now, but also my perch as a practicing architect for 30 years. What's really fascinating right now, and I think could be really uh, awesome, but also like scary at the same time, is that the ability for a small company mid-sized company to deploy AI to create a company that's very valuable, is already there. I saw a stat on LinkedIn recently, that ranked like the top 5 at the time anyway. And one of the things that strikes me is Midjourney. Like Midjourney is a platform that a lot of architects use for image creation. But Midjourney at the time that I saw this reporting had generated about $200 million of revenue with like 25 people. That's a that's
Yeah.
astonishing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's astonishing. And so, what space ultimately over as this plays out and the industries that AI effects take hold, and if there is a trimming of like staff size in order to be able to sort of take advantage of these tools, what does that mean for real estate? I don't know. I mean, on one hand, it's like really exciting. What do they want? Right? Like we would love to think about, as designers and owners, like, how do we tweak what we have to address the needs of like few that are just in a different realm? But then there's the downsides of that, as you rightly point out. Like, are they leasing? Are they taking space that at the expense of others because those industries don't exist anymore? I mean, that's a risk that we run, and we'll see how it plays out. I mean, I can tell you my drive from Oakland to Menlo Park is in both directions is long again. So plenty of people are going to work. So that's a good
Right.
sign. But like, who
Right.
knows how this plays out? Um,
Yeah. I think the Bay Area is, Northern California may not be kind of the best, primer or, whatever you want to call it, exemplar of this, because I do feel like, most of the AI companies are based here. So I feel their growth is going to be impacting, primarily the, commercial real estate market here. At the same time as they start to disrupt other industries, these companies that they disrupt will not necessarily be, based in the Bay Area. They could be
yeah,
based in Germany or North Carolina or wherever. And so, I was having dinner with an attorney, commercial estate attorney, a couple of weeks ago, and one of the questions he was asking me, what do they need all this space? And I said, well, I mean, I imagine they're going to have a legal department which will start replacing law firms. They're going to have an SAS department, which or a SaaS department is going to start, replacing, the software as a service companies. They're going to have all these things. Maybe a weather or video generation group, right? And I can't imagine why they wouldn't. I mean, I don't think they're going to stop and just be like, oh, we're not going to get into that because there's already a company in there. If companies are making money in certain areas, I can definitely see them, expanding in those areas. And he admitted, even for his law firm, which is a West Coast sort of big law firm, he said, yeah, the real estate demand for them is evolving, right, in terms of space that they need, and that kind of stuff. It
Let
is
me ask you,
interesting.
was the need declining? Did they need less
Declining.
space?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
hmm
sort of the kind of maybe obvious to me question. I don't know. But yeah, that was a point that he was sort of making. It's definitely changing. And he also admitted they were about to sign a contract with with a legal AI firm that will then change how they do business at
Yeah.
some point. Right. So,
Yeah.
um,
I tell you, my perspective as an architect, I feel similar feelings to your attorney friend, like that, the bulk of the labor in the architecture profession is dedicated to the production of technical drawings. It's
right.
not where all the value is created and all the fun that you see in the magazines is created. There's certainly plenty of labor associated with that. Don't get me wrong, but when you need the most people working on a project, it's in technical delivery. None of the AI tools have caught up to this part yet. Like there's a lot of focus on the
Right.
visualization engine and the design side, and that really does actually change speed. Like it accelerates it greatly, and quality too of permutation of ideas. You can just get so many different looks at something in so little time. But when it comes right down to it, the tools have not adapted. And so on the technical side, so like architecture firm, and the going forward stand to be disrupted in that way, but they're not quite there yet because that they haven't, the AI tools haven't zeroed in there. But like to your point, what do they do? I mean, they will, you know what I mean? And that will have a big ripple effect on architecture firms in the next period. I mean, who knows how fast it evolves. It feels like it's evolving incredibly fast. But the
Yeah.
nature of practice will change, that I've known my entire career of 30 years is going to change drastically, and not very soon either.
Yeah.
So
Have you as an architect, I imagine sort of the, traditional path into that work is somebody finishes, college, then goes, works as a, kind of a low level architect, draftsman, whatever. I don't know if I'm saying
mhm.
these terms correctly, Rob, so please correct me. But you kind of learn almost sort of like an apprenticeship, right? I mean, this is probably the closest to an apprenticeship, I think, in this that we have in an industry, right? Is that going to evolve? Is that already
It's
changing?
100% been to this point an apprenticeship profession for sure. And I still think that because you have to interface so strongly with people who are doing physical work in the field, making the things that you design, it needs to maintain at least some tradition of apprenticeship, because
Yeah.
the people part of the equation requires more than just what you can search on a search engine, or like have, an agent create for you. You know what I mean? You have to understand how it's going to be applied and consumed and dealt with by the people who are using it. So I think that portion of the practice of architecture must remain, and is critical to remain. The funny thing is like, as an architect, when you get a call from a client, depending on the kind of project you're doing, it might be 5 years before you cut the ribbon, man. You know what I mean? Like, it takes a long
Or
time. So
or
like
seven if you're in
you don't,
California, or nine.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It depends on which
Right.
city you're working in. It might be 7, but it takes a long time to see what you did right and what you did wrong. You always think you're doing the right thing, but it takes a little bit of time. So that's where the apprenticeship piece is important. And AI, threatens to hijack that a little bit. You know what I mean? At this particular moment, and I think this is probably even true for your attorney friend, like the years of experience that someone in my situation has, and the lessons learned, the many failures and some successes that have kind of created the body of work, and knowledge that I have. Like, I love using AI. It's cool because it just helps me get to something really fast. But I also have the benefit and perspective of having been in front of the planning commissions and understand what those particular commissioners think about and feel about. And I know the contractors who are building the buildings, and I know what their relative strengths and weaknesses are. So I can apply judgment because I've got that body of work, and not let the AI tools off at face value and just apply, right? Because I have to, I say, but somebody who's learning, somebody who's just starting, like you're saying, coming out of college or grad school, they don't have the benefit of having aggregated all that yet. So they don't really have a whole lot of choice except to just see and take the AI at its face value.
Right.
But,
Right.
it's still only 50 or 55% of human knowledge, depending on which podcast you listen to, that it's amassed, which is still considerable, but it's also not perfect. So like that apprenticeship piece, man, I hope in the legal profession and the architecture profession and every other profession, that like that human engagement and that teaching element doesn't in fact, honestly, I think it probably makes it even more important on the going forward. That might even be the distinguisher when you get into, an outcome where AI starts to swallow up certain kinds of jobs. It's like, what your capacity to be able to connect that to human experience in meaningful ways is still the name of the game. Like, it's the
Yeah.
technology is there for
From
us. And so like how you connect that is, I think, going to be very valuable.
Definitely, definitely. Although I would say from a kind of a procedural point of view, I can see a lot of value of it being, let's say, used in planning or pre-planning or pre-permitting. Imagine if you're on the architecture side and you can basically enter your work into AI, and it gives you kind of some estimation, or maybe even accurately basically tell you this is wrong, or you can't do this, or code doesn't allow for that, or you need to change that. Like those things seem to be like a perfect place for a technology like this, where it can just
Already
sort of
there now,
shorten that feedback
for
time
sure.
to minutes versus like months or whatever, weeks, right?
Well, even comp studies. I mean, when we're looking for sites, like site acquisition, site
Right.
analysis, feasibility. I mean, there are a lot of tools that just sort of help at least, and this is actually not even that dissimilar of an example of like what it would be like in a design studio. I mean, you know, getting the permutations up on the wall and being able to create the sort of taxonomies of what those things are, and then be able to sort of like reasonably thoughtfully get to a group or small cluster of likely possibilities and then spend your time there has always been the name of the game. It's just, in the past up until now, and this point in our culture, like it's taken, weeks and a handful of people spending all their time doing that to sort of get to those things. And the reality is you can prompt your way into like 1,000 permutations in a minute.
Yes.
And then
Yep.
you can group those things and then start to more quickly drill down. And on the landlord side, there's a primacy for speed, right? Because we're competing for sites, we're competing for deals, like we're trying to make the best offer, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like, the faster that we can evaluate, the faster that we can move, the better our odds are. That's true, not just in finding the sites that we want to buy, but obviously going through the design and permitting and tolerance processes and stuff like that. Time is really, an enemy in a lot of respects. So like the more we can
Right.
collapse that, the better. So we love the idea that there's tools that can make us a little bit more nimble. And that would also extend to the people we hire to help us out. Like, the architects that work on our projects and engineers that work on our projects
Right.
now. It's like,
Right.
speed is important to us. So the AI does actually do that. So, honestly, getting rid of um, the effort to get to that few allows then the team to focus on the few. You know what I mean? Like put the time in where it really matters. And that's actually a great thing. So it's just hopefully people don't take it at face value that like whatever it spits out, it's done, because there's just more to it than that, almost
Right.
generally.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think that's a very important point. I mean, certainly with AI, when we've used it, also it's been very important to sort of double check and sort of cross check and make sure that it doesn't hallucinate or doesn't lead you down the wrong path, essentially, right? I'm also curious. I mean, you and I, we sit here in Silicon Valley, Northern California, so we're a little bit more open to these concepts. We're a little bit more exposed to these new technologies. I mean, there's sort of the nature of just the way people are, I think, here. uh, Rob, you've lived and you've worked with other parts of the country. Do you feel like it's a bit of a bubble? And I'm not talking like a financial bubble. I'm talking like we're isolated here in this region a little bit more than maybe other parts of the country. Like, what's your sense?
Well, I've been lucky enough to live around the country. I've been lucky enough to work around the country, and yeah, you're right. There is no place like this. It's amazing. You know what I mean? In mostly all good ways and a few ways that are a little frustrating, but generally speaking, the ecosystem of innovation and curiosity and just business innovation hustle, it's pretty hard to match. And we're blessed with the phenomenal universities that helps create that talent that you know permeates out into the ecosystem of the professions and the research and development engine that is Silicon Valley. I mean, it's really we're lucky to be here and have all those resources, and then the success that happens in business feeds back into those universities. So it's a really great symbiosis. But I do remember w- I had a small office in Boston for a while, and then prior to HGA's acquisition of my firm, they also had an office in Boston. So I spent a good bit of time over there for the last 5 years. Same thing in the headquarters office of HGA. I spent a lot of time in Minneapolis, worked on a project there, pretty good sized project. Yeah, I just got to see the different flavors simultaneously, what it's like to be there, and the speed with which things moved. I remember Boston feeling very normal very quickly after COVID by comparison to here. As we all know, like it took a long time, and COVID left a real mark on
Yeah.
the landscape, the urban experience, just people's fortunes, people's struggles. It was hard here, and it stayed hard for kind of a long time compared to Boston, which was up and running pretty quickly from a cultural perspective. People out on the street. It's a
Are
city
are
where
you are
people
you
walk.
calling us soft, Rob? Is that what you're doing here?
Nah, we're an
We're
innovation
we're not
engine.
tough as our nor'easters.
Well, you got to be pretty hard to live in Boston. So, um, but the flip side of it it also feels similar when I go there now. But here it's like we're on that kind of vertical part of the
Yeah,
hockey stick in a way. Like this reminds me a little bit of like I started my architectural practice in 2010. So you would call that the very beginning of the last cycle. So I saw the entire rise of that cycle, and this feels a lot like the time we're in right now. I'd say this is like very 2012ish. You know what I mean? It feels that way, where it's like
yeah,
you can start to see that there's something really like vibrant happening.
right.
And we're in that mode where I think we're probably going to see that run for a little bit, and hopefully it doesn't hockey stick in the crash. Hopefully it just, a nice shallow arc would be fantastic for everyone. Hopefully that's what we see, but I think AI will accelerate this. Um, hopefully not too drastic. I mean, I think my experience in this, Vlad, is like 5 to 7 year cycles is what I remember. Usually like big presidential elections usually corresponded to things sort of
Sure.
slowing down and trying to find their footing. And then, 5, 7 years would go by, we'd be at the top of the cycle and we'd have to reset. This last one was insane, right? It was an 11-year run. It was just fueled by zero interest rates and just crazy innovation. Like none of those ultimately proved out to be all that healthy long term for us, right?
Right,
So like
right.
hopefully we can stay in a little
Even
bit
though I would
more
argue a
middle.
generation of people thought that was normal, right? That's the crazy part is a lot of people just thought, 1-2% interest rates. That's just where we're at, and
Yeah.
that's the new norm. And
Well,
I
in the
don't know.
commercial real estate, how many people thought that this was just easy? You find a way to get in and buy some real estate with some friends or a syndicate, and just, of course, you'll make money. It's real estate. And it's like, actually, that's really not true. It's not historically true. It's not presently true. It's like you got to really fight for a good project and operate it at a high level to keep tenants happy, keep like that's really the business of real estate. So just the betting game of buying at the right basis and flipping it, like that might have worked out for a couple of people, but it also wiped out several in this last cycle, which is unfortunate to see. But
You're now on the development owner side, right? Acquisition side. So you're kind of on the client side, I guess, of things,
yeah.
of where the world sits. How much is AI, permeating into the lives of what you guys do?
We interact with the AI tools here daily. Um,
Okay.
and all forms of them. We're using chat, we're using Claude, we're using Perplexity. I mean, those are all kind of avenues of exploration for us. Claude has got a lot of energy right now just because they've made a real pitch, and people have figured out really great ways to help use it analytically, like when we're, like looking at financial models and projections and so forth. It just really helped us create some pretty slick tools to, quickly assess offering memorandums
Yep.
and be able to
Yep.
underwrite them very quickly. On the, on the work that we're doing right now and coordinating the design of some of our projects, like AI is a daily tool for us. You know what I mean? So,
Interesting. Yeah.
are we an AI company? Heck no. We're a nimble small team. There's 7 of us here, um, but and ranging from property management to site acquisition analysis and what I do in development. But it really helps us be sharper and move faster. Because again, like I said earlier, time is the name of the game and real estate. So like the
Yeah,
faster you can move,
it's
and
a tool that can be
yeah,
applied to many different things, right? I mean, sometimes when I have these conversations with people, I ask them, do you handwrite your notes anymore? You don't. You use you either record them or you type them up, or I mean, we're moving away from the manual to the digital. We've moved away from manual a long time ago, I would argue. But it is interesting how fast it's, I think, coming, and like everybody's experimenting with it, right? And I think that's it. That's good. But at the same time, it is also interesting to see how quickly some industries are adopting it. And look, Rob, you're a cool guy. You're a progressive guy. You're definitely on the cutting edge of these things. So maybe you guys are maybe a little more ahead. Do you think some of your peers around the country are doing the same, or it's still kind of like there's one person in one office that's sort of tinkering with it, and that's about it?
I think a lot of I would assume that a lot of folks in the real estate space are in the same lane that we're in right now. We're experimenting, we're learning, we're trying to figure out ways that it can help us, and we're not, and from our perspective, Vlad, like, and I think this is probably widely true. Like, I think we're really no different than people that are using this. All we're trying to do is like figure out how to be more precise more quickly, so that we can better assess and more rightly assess opportunities. As landlords, we're nowhere if people don't want to either office in our buildings or live in our buildings. So I mean, we're doing all this because we want, you know, quality projects for people to work in and live in. Right. And so, we still really value the people, like they're what make the projects work. And so like, if we can, be a little faster and a little leaner and a little more nimble to get things done, I think we're, just trying to explore how that
Yeah,
works and
100%,
try
100%.
those. And
Right.
I think a lot of people are doing that right now.
I think
And
so too. I do think so too. My
how
personal
do you
guess
use
is
it?
that. Well, I think so. We use it for analysis, and I mean being able to dump data into ChatGPT and process reports, even do stuff like hey, here are a bunch of leases. Have we written about them? Things like that. Which
Yeah.
sometimes would take you, I don't know, a couple hours of, kind of going through, websites and looking at what we've done and sort of researching, right? Like you said, it just, speeds up some of those things, and things that maybe took you, it compresses the amount of work. So whatever it took you, let's say, whatever you accomplished in a week, let's say years ago, a couple of years ago, even, you could probably accomplish in, I don't know, in some cases, a couple of days now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that mean for your sanity? I don't know. That I have found that, like, sometimes my anxiety has gone up because I feel like, okay, I got to jump on this. I need this information as soon as possible.
Yeah.
You begin to train yourself that you can get something really quickly, and if you don't, you mentally start to kind of worry. So I have discovered that as well, and my personal kind of, this is just from talking to some people, and I feel like people are not sharing how much you're using it. I think in some cases they're either embarrassed, or they're shy, or they think they're going to whittle their job or their importance to the company if they admit how much they're actually using it. I think it's being used a lot more than people lead on. I think when I hear Satya Nadella saying things like, and again, this was last year he said this, the CEO of Microsoft said that something like 30% of their code is being written by AI. I think that's probably closer to 90%. He's just not going to say
Yeah.
that.
I think,
That's
no,
my guess.
I mean, all the podcasts I listen to make it sound like the code is already doing that. It's already
Yeah.
debugging. It's already rewriting. It's all, so, yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah. Which is actually like pretty astonishing when you think, back over, I mean, you and I are about the same age. So it's like when I think back when I got my first cell phone, and like how that opened up the world, and then it turned into my first BlackBerry, and then so on. And here we are right now. Like the iPhone you and I have in our hands is more powerful than any computer we ever
Right.
used in our lives. You know what I mean? Leading up to all this. So it's pretty cool to see how all this is developing. You just, you hope though too that it gives the right framework for us though, culturally and socially, that it becomes a benefit to all of us instead of a curse, but like there's a lot of power in this, and obviously, there's a potential downside there too. I've loved to listen to some of the, like Dario. Last year, I listened to his podcast with some of his other C-suite colleagues on Lex. It was a super long podcast, but it was really, really interesting talking about. I mean, this is a guy that really feels very strongly about the
Yeah.
safeguards
Yeah.
that need to be in place for the the good adoption of this, and you hope for the best that everybody in that space feels the same and acts the same.
And
You know?
it's funny you bring that up because I was just listening to the I think this is the New Yorker story that was written about Sam Altman, and one of the things that they were talking about in the article is, I guess, I don't know if this is kind of government or some institution did like an evaluation, and graded all the models on their safety, and they all got F. Claude got a D, and Gemini got a D minus. So it's kind of interesting, he is sort of seen as like this, maybe the highest level of maybe ethic, kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but
Yeah.
he's certainly aware of the ethics of using these products. But even his company, I guess, when you compare it to sort of what it can do or what one can do with it, right? Where that leaves you.
Yeah.
He has had some interesting perspectives, and there was a conference in India, I think late last year, that he attended with Altman and some of these other folks. And there's some YouTube interviews with him. I encourage people to really sort of search for that and listen to what he thinks, how this is going to change industries. I feel like it's he's seeing things that when he says it, it sounds drastic. It sounds like, he's kind of looking at kind of worst case scenario. But I do strongly believe that industries will get disrupted tremendously. And I do also believe that just the way sort of capitalism works, right, in terms of cutting costs and maximizing profit and kind of eliminating sort of employees when they can do it, they will. And I do wonder also if that leads us down the path of thinking about some social reforms that we need to sort of consider and think about what happens when you have a lot of people that are unemployed or can't get work, can be retrained, things like that, or don't have the opportunity to be retrained because now there's AI that does all the other things that they could potentially do, right? And I think there's only so many plumbers and gardeners that this country or this world can take, right?
Yeah.
So I am sort of a little bit worried about that, and it does seem like it's coming very, very fast. I feel like some of these things that they're talking about, like this new model, Mythos or whatever it's called, that they haven't revealed yet, but it's being tested by banks and sort of tech companies for its ability to break essentially any code. 6 months ago, 4 months ago, we weren't. This was all still in the very theoretical realm, right? And here
Yeah.
we are today. It looks
Yeah.
like a tool like that exists. Okay, so what does that mean 6 months later? What's going to happen 6
Yeah.
months from now, right? And those are things that I think we as a society need to start thinking about. And I know we're getting a little bit kind of deep into the esoteric here, but it does pose threats that I think on the kind of a large macroeconomic point of view, we're going to have to think about how we address them.
Yeah. 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 Agreed. Agreed. Um, I, I, I guess on the optimist side of me, though, Vlad, I think what's interesting is like I got interested in architecture because I like to make things with my hands, right? So wood shop, metal shop, all of these things that like pretty much are eliminated in schools for the most part now. This created a fascination to me with how things are put together, how they're made.
Yeah.
And in the backdrop of all of this, I was growing up in a time where there was an increasing like pressure I felt in, not like in a negative way, but I felt it among me and my peers, my friends. Like, we need to go to college. We need to get a great knowledge industry job. Like, so like I like to make things, but it's like, well, you should be an architect and not be a framer, right? As if one is better than the other. It's just silly. Um, and but that whole dynamic is maybe upside down now. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
got one son that just finished grad school. I got one who's a junior. I know you have a college age child too. They're coming out at a time when there's a lot less value on young people starting out in knowledge industries and maybe like won't be needed at all in 5 to 10 years or less or whatever. And so what do we do to pivot? I do still hang like we got here as a as a society, as a people through, depending on your perspective, either thousands or millions of years of evolution. And we did it by working together, figuring out how to get it done. Like it was life as a nomad wasn't possible. So like it made sense that people got together to help each other in that human condition where we're working, we're collaborating. I gotta feel like whatever cliff AI heads us to, it will just double down on the need and the value of us being together to solve not just the problems of Mother Nature, but also those problems that we've created for ourselves to solve. This may be one. So I do have optimism that that will be an outcropping, and it's probably necessary to bring that back to sort of simpler terms of
Yeah.
relating to each other and
Yeah,
cooperating and
I
collaborating.
do see a sort of, scenario that, if you cut down on expenses in capitalism and jobs and all this other stuff, at some point you're going to create it in, a whole society that can't afford to buy those products. So what's the point of like, making all of those things if there's nobody to buy them?
Exactly.
And I know that's sort of a drastic point of view, but I do think that at some point, yeah, like you're gonna have to, think about like, okay, and again, maybe there's some, income models or something like that where value is distributed somehow, right? Where AI, really sort of helps everyone, and I'm optimistic like you, Rob, that those models exist. It just kind of depends who ends up controlling the models, I think, right? But I do feel like, and I think Dario Amade said this in his interview, during that India conference. One of the big things that he's seeing happening, very soon is going to eliminate a bunch of, diseases, like things like that, right? Um, which I think is super promising, and that's amazing. In the wrong hands, this Sam Altman article in the New Yorker also said, I guess somebody ran a model and it, asked it to create like new ways of like creating bioweapons, and within like a few minutes it came up with like 40,000 new chemical compounds that can do things. Yeah, so you're like, oh my god, can we focus in on the right stuff, right? And solving things, and even things like climate change, right?
Yeah.
Which is sort of the obvious things that we should be trying to solve, right? Food production, or whatever, right? I do hope, I do agree with you. I do think that humanity has sort of a prevailed, and I think we will again. It just might be a rough period next, I don't know, 10 years till we get there. So I
It's
don't know.
for sure going to be the most transformative period in certainly our lifetimes, last, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. Like, is your
there's
son
nothing
that's
that comes
getting out of
close.
college? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is your son that's getting out of college? Is he concerned? What's his kind of anecdotal experience in terms of finding work and talking to companies, and how's that going?
Well, my older son finishes with his degree from Cal. He's got a master's degree in real estate development. He's actively engaged working, which is great. My younger son, who's a baseball player, is a people person. He's majoring in communications. Marketing may not exist in the way that it has up until this point. So does he
Yeah,
think about
yeah,
that a little bit differently? Um, you're a former basketball player. As an athlete, is sports marketing maybe, right? That's still a people centric activity. People go
yes.
to the park, they watch, they participate. So there's something there. But yeah, I think that there is a little bit of concern with my younger about what's next for him. You know what I mean? Like what really is after baseball's done and after college is done, like what he thought he might pivot one way, but now maybe he's going to have to think about going another. It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard, at
It's,
that age, as it's hard enough trying to figure out what
it is.
your next step is anyway. But
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It's been interesting. Our daughter is sophomore in college, so she's been sharing some of her experiences, talking to some folks, and it's interesting. Her major is it's in sociology, which I personally think is actually going to be a very important major going forward, especially with sort of AI. But she's talked to people who exclusively basically said, look, unless you change your major to like a technical major, a finance major, I have no need to speak with you, which I think is interesting because I think a lot of those technical, financial kind of, roles,
they're going to belong to agents, my man.
Yeah. I feel like I can build an agent this afternoon that does, 80% of that work, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that, she's getting that kind of feedback. We've had some conversations with her where, she was genuinely concerned whether she's on the right path. And, we try to tell her, no, you're on the right path. You keep exploring, keep learning. Your job is not to know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Your job is to really, open yourself to opportunities, right? And kind of figure it out, right? But I do think some of these, studies in, humanities and things like that, you say your son is a people person. So that means, he can be a salesperson, he can be a politician, he can do, right? Things like that will be, will be valuable, right? Whereas, I don't know,
I think
it sounds
that
like
facility might be increasingly valuable as we sort of head
100%.
to this unknown precipice that AI will take us to.
Yeah,
having the
100%.
capacity to connect people, connect everything back to the experiences of ourselves as human beings. I mean, just in keeping that at the forefront of whatever occupation you're in, there's going to be a lot of value in that because there's a lot of people that are going to get left behind in that from a technical standpoint. So like if you can be the bridge builder, in the metaphorical sense, and keep people and culture at your forefront, I think there's going to be I think there's going to be a lot of value there because it's going to be needed. Like, let's be honest. This is it's such a strange time with how the technology tools that we have surrounding us have just affected people's sense of themselves in the world. That some people talk about this as being neurological sort of outcroppings of what the sort of condition of the phones we have in front of our face all day do to us and how they wire our brains and how they think. And that's, it feels true.
Right.
Like if you look at the data, it doesn't seem like it's even deniable. Just they seem so correlative. And so, there's never been a more important time to think about whatever occupation you have and what you do, how it really can unite and affect and leave a positive imprint on the people who are going to interact with it. Like whether that's a building, whether that's a product, whether that's a service, like that's going to mean a lot going forward, I think, because we're going to need it so much.
Yeah.
Maybe we already do.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. Rob, as we close our conversation here, we have this little segment called Microscope Telescope. The purpose of this segment is to zero in on, one or two topics or take sort of a, high level perspective on, one or two topics, right? So, the idea is to, explore something that we think in the future is going to be important. I know we talked most of our conversation here already about AI and its impact on various different things, but I'll start off. I have kind of a telescope point of view, meaning like let's look further into the future, kind of 30,000 foot view of where things are. I do think that we as a society will be faced with challenges in terms of some of our social relationships and, what that means to, money, income, those kinds of things, housing, food. If there's going to be an abundance of a lot of different things, I'm curious, who is going to be starting to provide that abundance to others. But I think those things will challenge us. I would encourage people to start thinking about that, because I think those will be, policy changes that will be things that impact employment, that impact, even our kids coming out of college, right? Where they're going to go, not just physically, but where they're going to work and things like that. So, Rob, you had a kind of a microscope perspective, right?
Well, I think that the microscope perspective on that to me is, Vlad, I think that the importance that people will uh, play in a supportive network with each other. I mean, one example. I mean, what occurs to me is that the failures of the things that will be provided by the system or our government will naturally have to be found in our neighbors and our families and our friends. I really do think that. I mean, you can look at great examples of community-based organizations that are there just to help. They're a blessing to all of us. Nothing will become more paramount and important to help adapt to this change that you sort of see in the telescope view. And in the microscope, it's all about like that connective tissue of people and how that ultimately resolves in supporting one another, right? I mean, you mentioned food. Farmers markets are going to be even more important now. How beautiful is that?
Yeah.
Like you can think about buying locally with people who grow food nearby. I mean, that'll just be it'll be a necessity, but it'll also be a beautiful outcome. And you start to think about the things that you may not be able to buy on Amazon and get to your house in a day. Like, well, what if you made it or fashioned it with your own hands and learned how to do that with people around you, and just a return to maybe a supportive, simpler time, honestly, might be the best outcropping of what the kind of telescoping view might give us in the microscopic view, of being able to just get back to some basics on how to help one another get through this, which is what got us here in the first place, right? That's why we're all here, because we were really, really good at working together to solve problems. And I hope that the outcropping of the negative view on the telescope side, which hopefully is exaggerated, my friend, but you might be right, can be buttressed if you really just get down to brass tacks, like helping one another through this and being inventive in ways to support each other. I think would be a beautiful outcome, actually. Maybe set us back on the right path, societally, culturally.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm an optimist,
wonderful.
man. I hope it goes there.
I hope so too. Well, Rob, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. Really appreciate our conversation about how AI is impacting the industry and how it's permeating through our lives as well. Always good to see you.
Yeah, always good to see you. And this was really fun. I like that we got to veer away and expand a little bit just beyond the four walls of commercial real estate and just start to think a little more broadly. It affects everything and affects everyone, what's going on right now, and certainly our industries, but more than that too. So it's just fun to explore that. Look forward to more fun times this year, Vlad.
100%. All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you to our audience, and we'll be back with you soon next week. Stay tuned.
Thanks, everybody.